Ad strategy does not matter if your inventory is stuck outside of an Amazon warehouse for 3+ weeks. At AMZ Prep, we ship in tens of millions of items on a monthly basis. The most important thing that slowed down your inbounds is a few reasons. It is a domino effect that happened. Live unloads almost redirects that. So depending on what carrier, you need to be very careful of what truck you use. Here's the challenge that most merchants get stuck with. Ad strategy does not matter if your inventory is stuck outside of an Amazon warehouse for 3+ weeks. We've spent millions cracking the code on exactly how to optimize your inbound strategy. And in this episode, I'm going to be breaking down exact playbook of how we optimize inbound, avoid bottlenecks going into Q4, save money, cut cost, and most importantly, get stock into Amazon faster than ever before. Breakdown coming. So first and foremost, let me set the stage. At AMZ Prep, we ship in tens of millions of items on a monthly basis. We're one of the largest inbound injectors across the country, and we might ship in anywhere from 50 to 150 trucks a week going to the Amazon facility. So this is why you should be listening to me. And from this, we analyze tens of thousands of data points on a daily basis, and all of this condenses into exactly how we think about an Amazon inbound strategy. The way you'd obsess over your advertising or your inbound profitability, we look at one thing: inbound speed performance, and we absolutely obsess about it. Now, before we go into the tactical playbook, let's take a little bit of a step back 30,000 feet just to understand what the infrastructure between what Amazon has been building and some of the definitions around it. So first and foremost, there's NX IDs. These are the nationals. These are RX IDs, which are regionals. And then there's actual Amazon FCs, which are the physical facilities. A national facility is a cross dock that traditionally handles stock when it's going cross between different facilities. The regional is the last step, and the FC is the physical dock that's going to be receiving the product. So first, let's cover some key definitions, because I think for you to understand how to optimize your inbound strategy, you need to understand Amazon's infrastructure behind it. So the first three things is NX ID, an RX ID, and then the FC itself. So an NX ID, this is the national cross docks. An NX ID means non-inventory cross dock. Traditionally, these are used for only a few reasons. One, these are the national sortation facilities. They're massive, but they're exclusively cross docks used for Amazon AWD and for LTL shipments. So if you're shipping in an LTL to Amazon, sending to one facility directly, you're sending it to an NX ID. And what this means is that they will then consolidate multiple different LTLs and they will route them to a regional. Now, a regional, which is an RX ID. Now, an RX ID, this is a receiving center or a regional location. Now, what these are used for is these are actually part of Amazon's internal receiving and traditionally the last leg before you're shipping to an Amazon FC. Inventory may or may not actually be received and weighted and then passed on to the final leg. Now, they act very similar to an NX ID, but they're the internal before the final check-in at an FC. So they're almost like a receiving center. And if you optimize accordingly, you actually want to be routing to the RX IDs, which I'm going to be explaining about later today. So in summary, an NX ID is the national cross docks. These are meant for AWD, sending full LTL, full trucks. If you're sending to one location or an LTL, it's going to go to an NX ID versus a regional acts similarly, but this is if you're trying to avoid placement fees and shipping to multiple locations. And from there, they're going to send directly. Now, why this makes sense is that if you think about Amazon's infrastructure as a whole, when you're allowed to split shipments or optimize shipments, they're requesting you to actually send to their regional cross docks. When you have the ability to send to one, you're getting hit with placement fees. And the reason you're getting hit with placement fees is that you're sending to a national, they need to do the sortation, they need to organize their LTL, and then they need to distribute to the regionals directly. So there's a way to be able to optimize both, but the most important thing is understanding that traditionally a regional will be faster, it's sortation, and it's one less lag of the overall Amazon infrastructure. Now let's talk about the Amazon FCs. Now there's three core types, and there's a lot of FCs across the country, but they've actually broken them up for standard, oversized, and hazmat facilities. So we know every facility across the country, and there's different codes depending if you're shipping a standard size, an oversized, or a hazmat product. Now, you need to keep in mind when we start thinking about FC strategy, this is the entire final leg of the receiving of Amazon. So your stock will make it or break it at one of these Amazon receiving bays, and it is the final leg before your stock actually gets checked in. So knowing what facility and what facilities are performing is going to be so critical for understanding exactly how to optimize your inbound speed. And so what happens over time is that because of the FC and NXD logic of Amazon, they want to get your stock to where the customers are. So as we start collecting more data and Amazon is understanding where your customers are performing, they will have to be able to put and distribute inventory across the country. So if you sell surfboards, there's a high logic from the NXD network that you will be sending product to Florida and California. South Dakota is not going to be getting your surfboards. And keep in mind, there's certain facilities, because it's a surfboard, of where your stock's going to get sent into. Understanding that logic is going to be so critical as we get through the rest of this. If you don't understand the difference between the NXD, the RXD, and the FCs, you can't control your check-in times. And if you can't control your check-in times, you can't control sales velocity or your out of stock rate. If you can't control those, you're going to be in deep trouble. This is exactly what we want to go through. Okay, so let's talk about the core strategy of what I wanted to get into. So things that slow brands down now. The most important thing that slow down your inbounds is a few reasons. One, if you're shipping via LTL, you have to send it to one of the NX IDs, and from there, there's a sortation, there's a pending time, those have to get sent to the regionals. There will be a big bottleneck in terms of how it's going to sort. And one of those key things around placement fees is if you don't have 5 identical boxes, you actually don't qualify to be able to split the shipment, which means you'll be forced into an NX ID, which will cause a huge lag of time and cost because of placement fees and delays and so forth. Some of the other things that can also impact your overall inbound strategy is the Amazon facilities that you're sending to, whether you're sending mixed pallets or clean 1 SKU LTLs, the way that your items are actually packed might impact the way that Amazon's going to be checking it in. But most importantly, it's about where you're sending it and how are those FCs and RXIDs getting influenced to set you up accordingly. Now, a good rule of thumb, if you want to focus on inbound speed, you do not use an NXID. Where this gets a little bit challenging is Amazon AWD is built off an NXID network. So there are almost conflicting statements that if you want to prioritize inbounds but you're using AWD, you need to really have a strong infrastructure in place because you have to go through an NXID to get your stock into Amazon. If you want the simplicity of sending to one Amazon warehouse, or maybe your 3PL doesn't want to split the shipment 5 ways. We see it happen quite often, or for whatever reason, you want to send it to one. You're going to get hit with placement fees, but more importantly, the speed in. This could add anywhere from 8 to 25 plus days because of the sorting and the handling at each one of those 3 legs. Outside of that, simple things like prep mistakes, labeling issues, where you put the case label on every single master box, all of these things can influence the overall inbound speed. But these are, I would call it secondary challenges versus, the grander thing, which is how do we improve check-in times? Now, some of the things that we do, which makes these so effective. The goal state for every merchant is to be able to send 5 trucks to 5 RXIDs, right? That is kind of the dream state for most merchants. Majority of the time, most merchants can't. They're not filling that up on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which is why we decided to consolidate all of our merchants to a few, what we call sortation centers across the country. Think of our sortation centers very similar to RXID. They're a receiving bay, we're consolidating multiple, and then we're sending it to trucks to go to the RXIDs directly. So that's number one, is that the ability to cross-consolidate and send directly to RXID is a big reason that we can factor it in. Number 2 is that being able to utilize our own carrier central account is a big play. Now, for most merchants, they won't be able to do this. You'll have to work with someone that has it. But having the ability to have our own carrier central means that we're allowed to pre-book appointments. So instead, what traditionally happens with 3PLs is that you'll finish the shipment, and this might be happening to you, is that you'll finish the shipment, but then you'll have to request from Amazon to come pick it up. So if you're using Amazon LTL, Amazon FTL, or using a third-party carrier, they're not going to pick it up until it's either ready, or they'll pick it up and then it's going to get sent to the NXID and wait for a full truck if you didn't fill one. So if you only have 5 pallets and you're sending it to one location, Amazon's going to take it to their NXID, but that might take 5 days to pick up. At the NXID, they need to wait for trucks for each one of the regional. See where I'm going? Where each one of these adds another layer of time and complexity. So what happens is sometimes a 3PL actually blocks you from being able to split it 5 ways because of complexity and cost and the whole 9 yards. So we want to split it 5 ways. That's going to be the key. We pre-book appointments 90 plus days ago. So because of that, the frequency of the inbounds naturally is a higher standard. So for example, we're sitting here now in August. September, October, we already have appointments booked on a daily basis to each one of those Amazon FCs. We cannot do that on demand. Now, sometimes we have to. It's a very random facility or random Amazon FC that we're going to, which we haven't seen before, or it's a new one. But almost all of our shipments we've pre-booked in advance. Now, why this is so critical is that this means that on Tuesday of next week, we have a full truck going to Pennsylvania too. Because of this, we can immediately, whether we fill the truck or not, that's our issue to deal with. But because we have it pre-booked, it's a big competitive advantage. So if you're able to pre-book because you have your data, great way to get it. Number 3, which is one of the most controversial things we do, is that we floor load a lot of these containers. Now, the reason we floor load is a few different reasons, and you might be able to do the same. Is that because we floor load the containers, this allows for 2 key benefits. 1, there's less appointment requests inside of Carrier Central. Carrier Central is the freight platform to book appointments with Amazon, and there's less appointments happening for floor loaded containers. It's less popular, it's more difficult to get, and because of this, we take advantage. On top of that, when we think about floor loaded containers, what happens at an Amazon RXID is they actually get basically a live unload prioritization. And so what happens is that instead of what's called a drop trailer would mean that if you look at an Amazon facility, there's a bunch of trucks waiting outside. A trucker will come in, they'll drop the truck, and it will wait a few days in terms of prioritization before your stock actually gets to, a dock that gets formally checked in. When we're doing these floor loaded, traditionally call it 95% are live unloads, which means that the second it gets to the facility is the second it starts checking in. So this is beneficial for a few reasons. 1, this cuts a few days off the check-in time, but more importantly, we have brands that sell supplements, meltables, chocolates, the whole 9 yards. And so if you're using a drop trailer, that could be an Amazon full truck, it could be LTL, it could be a third-party carrier. If you don't have this, that drop trailer might be there for 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, and that truck can get to 100 plus degrees inside, right? So if you have a melting point, a bunch of customers have feedback, that product gets melted, and then it hits reviews, which hits your BSR, it is a domino effect that happened. Live unloads almost redirects that. So we work with a bunch of supplement brands that, because they want to figure out live unloads, they're just trying to prioritize inbound speeds, and they do not want to drop trailer because now your product's melted, right? Or if you have sensitive product, you don't want it in, I don't know if you've ever been in a container, in the midst of summer, and I hope you never do, because that's an experience I don't want to repeat. It's hot, right? So this is one thing that you do have to really keep in mind. A few more things that we do is that, so on top of the floor loading, we'll actually consolidate multiple brands. This one's a little bit more challenging, especially if, you're a merchant directly, you might not have that ability. That's why a lot of the brands end up piggybacking on us. So if you don't have that ability, right, you'll have to be able to consolidate with someone like us. But if you have enough volume, or maybe your 3PL can, they might be able to request to multi-consolidate brands into one container. Could be on an LTL, FTL, depends on the instance. But if you're able to do this and send a full truck to an RXID directly, right, you'll have a lot more smooth sailing, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the full ability to ship full trucks, which most merchants can't, then you'll have to be able to either send LTL, which we want to avoid, or we have to be able to consolidate multiple brands. So you should ask your 3PL if they have it available. It will be challenging, but maybe they have the density to be able to match it. But a part of the floor loading idea is because now we can share the cost, right? So we can fit, call it 48 pallets instead of 26 inside of a truck, because we're floor loading it. So we're literally stuffing it to the floor to ceiling with these master cases. And so we get the passive savings off to the merchant, versus if it's an LTL, even if you share the truck, the challenge is costing, right? And it costs a lot of money to get one truck from here to Texas. It's just as simple as that. So these are some things you have to keep in mind. Now, the thing that I think is a little bit unique about how we approach it, which I'd really encourage you to do, is that we over obsess about inbound performance per DC. So we know every facility, their current congestions, their bottlenecks, what facilities are performing, what facilities are faster, which ones are slower, and we're constantly iterating. Now, you do not have the ability to choose what Amazon facility you get inbounded to. That's out of your control. But depending on a few manipulations, whether it's the ship from address, so you can try to use our ship from address, you can use your 3PLs, you can try different ones to be able to adjust the inbound strategy. You can look at historical. So for example, West Coast in Q4 traditionally bottlenecks. AWD, because of a national crossdock, will bottleneck. So these are things that we've seen over time so right now we're prioritizing all of our merchants to go to the East Coast, right? And even we have a facility in California going into probably October, we might have the ship from address on those shipments as the East Coast. And the reason for that is we're trying to push for East Coast placements, even though it's going to cost more money on the freight. We're prioritizing speed. Speed is value, speed is cash, and cash is king. So that's the way that we think about it. So we're constantly evaluating on a daily basis all these data points of FC transfers, FC processing, how long is the check-in time. Some facilities check in a day, some take a week, right? And over time, we want to be able to prioritize those and also request more frequency of appointments. And what we've seen over time is that depending on performance, we start seeing some locations, right? Like the puck follows according to what the performance is. We're analyzing all that data. And you can do this yourself, right? So what we do with a lot of merchants is that we'll go into their Amazon account and we'll just audit everything. What we call it a inbound speed analysis. So what we'll do is we'll do an exercise where we'll take the past 90 days of inbound shipments and we're measuring the cost, what facility it's sent to, the inbound placement fee, the regional cost, your freight costs, but more importantly, how long did it take to get checked in? For the time that you started the shipment at your 3PL or your own warehouse, to the time it was picked up, to the time it went to a national, to a regional, to physically available in stock. And the national average right now outside of Q4 might be 20 some odd days, where we might average 2 to 6, depending on it. We're under 2 days dock to dock, which means that from the day that it touches our facility to the time it gets to the next, on average, it's 2 days. But there's a variance of how many days it gets checked in. Some will check in 24 hours, some will take 2 to 3 days. So we say 2 to 6 days, but we're one of the fastest in the country because of the amount of volume we're doing. So just not that many players that can do it at the stage that we're operating at. So with this data, we end up doing a few things. We understand what FCs we're going to and the highest performers and trying to pivot our strategy accordingly. But more importantly, we also utilize a bunch of different trucks. So we utilize Amazon Freight. There's a lot of, I won't bore you guys with all the freight companies, but there's a bunch that we can utilize that because we have full trucks, we can understand performance. And sometimes carrier metrics inside of Carrier Central matter a lot. So depending on what carrier, you need to be very careful of what truck you use. There's Amazon Freight, which can be a great program. I'll talk about it in another episode. But you want to analyze what carriers you're actually using, right? Because they might have better what's called credit score inside of Carrier Central, which allows them to get better inbound times and better inbound speed, right? So all these factors go into it. It is truly an orchestration that we've had to build. And obviously we have to over-obsess about it, but whoever is listening to this and thinking about their Amazon, they should be getting this deep because it is costing you potentially millions of dollars, whether it's out of stock, if it's sales velocity, if it's negative reviews because of meltable, if customers can't get it, that's an issue. And everything else in the business does not matter because of this one simple thing, which is how fast can stock get into Amazon? You with me? So a few more things I just want to cover. Number one is that let's just think about the 3 terms there. There's small parcel, there's LTL, and there's FTL. So some merchants might actually be doing small parcel into the Amazon facilities. So they'll split a shipment 5 ways and they're doing small parcel. On paper, this seems like a great idea, but what ends up happening is that during Q4, it's a less restricted strategy. And what I mean by that is that 1, it is very costly to do small parcel because you're shipping parcels across the country. 2, the risk of inbound issues, on errors, on missing stock, on damaged stock drastically goes up. We've usually seen 4 to 5 times the amount of impact on quality assurance because you're shipping, 100 cartons across the country with different sorting facilities and UPS hubs, and UPS has their own sort. All these things can flag into it. So it's not feasible long-term, and there's a high risk of damage. And also you'll have very difficult time understanding full inventory control. Now, LTL is traditionally more difficult because if you're doing an LTL, you need to wait for the appointments at your 3PL. You then have to send it to a national cross-dock potentially, or you have to split it 5 ways to 5 different regionals to avoid placement fees. But then you're going to have to ship 5 pallets to 5 different locations, and you're going to have to pay $800 to Texas, $200 to New York, right? The 3 facilities going to California. You will get smoked in freight cost on these LTLs. It's going to take a really long time, but amazing. You avoid placement fees. There's a prisoner's dilemma. So the optimized solution is to always go full truckloads. You traditionally can't. That's why merchants might be using us as like a piggyback solution. If you need to, you can do small parcel. I'm not against it. it sometimes can work well, but it's not a long-term strategy. If you need stock in fast, split the shipment, use small parcel. It's not going to be cost effective, but sometimes you can get in as long as you need stock in as fast as possible. But if you want to build a consistent infrastructure, you'll have to either build your own load consolidation or piggyback on someone like AMZ Prep that already has the lanes going to the Amazon facilities. So peak season reality, I'm getting a lot of questions about what is the overall inbound strategy going into peak season, especially with Amazon. So here's the challenge that most merchants get stuck with, right? So you can front load inventory into Amazon. There's two challenges with that. And by front load, I mean ship as much in as possible and try to max out your inventory. Amazon has put restrictions on inbound limits now. So you're going to get dinged with either the highest or the lowest, which is a challenge. And then number two, Amazon Q4 storage fees spike. There's things called peak storage surcharges, which is around 3 to 4x your traditional storage rate during Q4. And because of this, what happens is that, great, you might stay in stock, but now you have a $500,000 storage fee for the 100,000 items that you're keeping inside of the Amazon facility. Big red flag, big challenge, but you did stay in stock. What's it worth? Now, option number two is that merchants will try to pull back because they have ASIN level limits and they try to do more frequent inbounds and it will bottleneck and receiving times will start to slow down at all levels. RXID, NXID, the FCs, everywhere will slow down. And what will end up happening is that merchants will go to stock during peak season. Most merchants hyper prioritize Q4 because of the amount of volume and that's where their money's made. And now they're actually out of stock, which impacts all things: sales velocity, total revenue. That out of stock percentage is something that we're obsessing about. So how do we think about this going into Q4? Number one is start early. This idea of testing us in November is a theme that we've seen over and over again. So brands will start talking to us and we're having conversations now and they're like, our inbound speed is fine at the moment. Why are we stressing about it? Yes, nothing sucks until you start getting punched in the face, and that will start happening around late September, depending on it. Now we're seeing merchants start front loading now in terms of they have containers coming in. August is a big punch and they're going to be flooding those Amazon facilities. So we might be able to see it earlier. But don't wait for last minute. Build a strategy going into August. You can also understand the flow, whether it's us or someone else. The idea is to make sure that you can test, validate the process, see what facilities are performing, and also make sure it works for your business. Number two is that do not over-index stock inside of Amazon. If we can limit storage during Q4, I will be amazed by the amount of merchants that never check their Q4 storage bills. It is massive and it is a huge cost. On the flip side, I would encourage you to understand your out of stock rate and run that from a running numbers of what you make in Q4. Yes, you might have a 3% out of stock rate, but we spoke to a merchant that does 100 million. 3% out of stock during Q4, $4 to $6 million, right? Over a monthly basis. Every day might be a $100,000 mistake for the merchant just for being out of stock, which if you just used our damn trucks, it might have not happened. So plan ahead of the pack, make sure you're going through it. Just keep in mind that national cross docks do get messy during Q4. It's Q4, it's busy. So try to avoid the national cross docks as much as possible. Even if that means splitting shipments 5 ways, if you're doing LTL and you can afford to take on that cost of 5 LTLs to 5 different locations, do it. Nationals traditionally will bottleneck. These will cause challenges going into Q4. If you need speed and as fast as possible, try small parcel shipment. I just wouldn't suggest a long term. It's just not a sustainable option and you might lose stock, which is a big challenge. And last thing I would say is don't over-index on AWD, right? I think they made a lot of improvements since last year, but AWD as a whole, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what we saw last year, we saw some merchants with all the inventory tied inside of AWD. What poses as an issue is you can't toggle on FBM, which is a great secondary solution. It's not ideal. It is what it is. Number two, you can't even send your own stock in. So if inventory is frozen inside of AWD, which we saw last year, you have no secondary solution to get stock into Amazon fast, right? So there was merchants that wanted to either send small parcel, use our trucks, just get something into the Amazon hub, but they had no inventory here because they completely over-index on AWD, which I did a whole episode on this, but set up parameters. Make sure you have overflow stock so you can either toggle an FBM, send in stock quickly from your own facility. But if you're using AWD, just enter that equation gently. I think it should be better than it was last year. But again, all your risk with one place is never a good thing. We say that even partnering with a 3PL, you always want options. Couple takeaways. Number one is that you don't need a better ad strategy, you need a better inbound strategy. So we need to spend less time there, more time here, and put some allocation resources towards really figuring this out. Number two is obsess over a few metrics as a team. Start measuring them in your huddles, your all hands, and whenever you're reviewing Amazon performance. That is inbound speed, your cost per cubic foot, your in-stock percentage rate, right? And really obsess over understanding what you're doing here and just get a grasp of what you're doing as an organization on the inbound infrastructure. Most merchants just aren't aware. They just let their 3PL ship it out and it's almost no man's land. There is millions of dollars in mistakes we see on a weekly basis talking to brands that are so easy fixes if they just had a little bit more attention to detail on it, but it almost just gets thrown underneath the rug. So I'd encourage you to start measuring those metrics, track them week on week, and start to see if you can make small adjustments and improvements. Now, if you want support, we do it for free. We do an inbound strategy basically. So what we'll do is we'll connect to Seller Central. We'll do an inbound assessment. We'll do a placement fee analysis. We'll basically give you a whole presentation going through all your data with our data science team. And what we'll end up doing is we'll basically audit the entire inbound strategy. So we'll give you inbound speed, your costings, your SLAs, build you a structure that you can just take back to your team. If you end up needing to use us, amazing. But we'll build the playbook for you to basically be like, hey, here's where you're at. Here's future state. Here's the bridge to get there. And some of it might be through us. Some of it might be through your own lanes. But we'll figure it out with you. And we'll actually build to show you exactly the average inbound times. You will be surprised how much you pay in placement and how slow it takes. I almost guarantee if you do a check now, it might be anywhere from 15 to 30 days. Some shipments might be taking 30, 40, 50 days. And as you get into Q4, it's just going to get worse. So we're happy to do a free, what we call an inbound assessment, inbound speed analysis. Just DM me, message me, you know where to get my details. The brands that win on Amazon don't just sell better, they ship better. And I think this is the overall theme that more brands are doing, is that their ops team is obsessing about this as much as we are. So you'll be continuing to see my content. I'm going to be kicking and screaming about this. It's something I'm very passionate about and I'm very knowledgeable about. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I love doing these things and I'm happy to do very specific ones. So we'll be doing more. Talk soon.